music. It is everybody's best friend. I mean, it is there for you whenever you need it, no matter what mood you're in. Whether you're having just an absolute amazing day, whether you're cripplingly sad or madly in love, or even if you're being a complete jerk, music will be there for you. And bringing us in was Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata. And I saw one writer refer to this as a profound meditation of the soul. And how appropriate is that? I mean, who of you can't listen to this piece without going on some sort of journey? I think it's appropriate that our second podcast is about music. The subtitle of our podcast is A Journey into Modern Day Parenting. And in our first podcast, we did a little bit of time traveling. And now, what could be better than music to further us on our journey? Who of us doesn't hear a song and immediately get swept away to a time or a feeling or an experience? I mean, it's truly unique in how remarkably powerful it can be in calling up vivid feelings and memories. Of all the artistic mediums, music is the one that is a part of everyone's life and in a major way. I mean, especially these days, right? Not everybody is into painting or poetry or reading or movies, but pretty much everyone loves and relates to music. And some of our most famous people on the planet are musicians, and for good reason. I mean, we consume music on massive levels. I was reading that a recent study showing that people nowadays listen to about 4.5 hours of music a day, or over 32 hours a week of music. Now, obviously, this has gone up because of our access to music. And we'll talk about the good and bad of the fact that we do have so much access to music, but clearly we are crazy about music. I mean, it's tough to even really talk about humanity without bringing up music. It's a natural part of every culture across the span of history. I mean, it's clearly a part of our nature as a species, right? But here's what I find strange. For something that is such a huge part of human life on Earth, and something that we so clearly enjoy and really maybe even need, we enjoy it perhaps above all other arts, but it's practically non-existent in the world of education. I mean, we do teach our kids a few kind of folk songs when they're young in preschool. And at best, now it's kind of a elective or a pullout that children get once a week in school, but even that is starting to diminish in the public schools at least. I mean, now music classes are basically reserved for those with special interest in music, right? I think all of us intuitively know that music has great powers. We've all seen and heard that playing music for your children in infancy and even in the womb is something that parents should do, right? But do any of us know why? I mean, do you really know why? I'm sure some of you do, but I don't know that it's important why. It's something that we do naturally. We know that is good for our children. But I want to start asking some questions. What if we did start using music as an integral part of education, especially in early childhood? What would it look like, and why would it be worth doing? What effects would it have? And if any, what would it affect specifically? Our next interview spells all of this out. In our first podcast, we talked about how we don't have all the answers, but we do know that there are answers. And that's why we're seeking out professionals in various professions to go ahead and give us these answers. And I can safely say that our first interview gave us our first answers as to why music is so powerful and why it is so important to education. Music can and should be a huge part of education, especially in early childhood. And our first guest, Tiffany Cameron-Shurtz, was the perfect person to give us these answers. Tiffany is part of a music program for children. The program is called Let's Play Music. And it's a really unique program because it's designed to simultaneously teach children the foundations for appreciation for music, giving them an ear for music, the foundations for playing instruments, while all the while giving them the foundations that they so crucially need to have by the time they get to kindergarten for your run-of-the-mill academics, if you will. Watching Tiffany, it's clear that she really knows what she's doing. And it's also clear that that is precisely the reason that she's doing it. The kids clearly love her, and she clearly is crazy about them. And it was a true pleasure to sit down with Tiffany and hear why she is involved with this program and the reasons why music is so effective with education and so much more. Now, we're still working on some technical specifics when it comes to our interview process, so bear with us with the quality of the recording. There is a lot of gold within. You're going to learn a ton about what music does to our brain and how crucial it can be to education. So turn it up, tune in, because it's time to chat.
Hi, I'm Tanya Friend, and I've been a speech and language pathologist for 13 years. I am also the owner and director of Chatterbox Speech Therapy, a speech therapy practice that serves the children and community in Albuquerque, New Mexico.
And I'm Corey Walker. I've been working with children for nearly 20 years, and I was a pioneering app developer in the area of speech and language pathology. We all have gifts in this life, and mine is knowing what makes children tick. Parenting in the modern age comes with uncharted challenges. We'll be bringing you discussions with experts in childhood development and introducing some tough questions and topics.
Together, with our experience and knowledge, we have created this podcast to help you with your child's development and wellness. So, listen up.
Because it's time to chat. Okay, so let's jump right in. Tiffany comes to us. How did you find us?
Actually, I was just looking around for some local events last fall and happened upon the Chatterbox Fall Festival, and so I found all the contact information and contacted Tanya, and just what drew me to Chatterbox was the fact that you guys do all of your therapy sessions as play-based sessions, and at Let's Play Music, we teach music through play, that we believe in that philosophy, that that's children's language of learning, and that's how they learn best. And so to have that common philosophy of teaching and learning for me just really drew me to you guys, and I thought, there are so many similarities between learning language and learning music that we might be able to come up with something pretty great.
Yes, no doubt. There really is. And I've kind of learned that through the handful of sessions that we've done together. There are so many similarities. Now, you work with Let's Play Music. Is that correct?
Yes. The company that I work for is Let's Play Music. And we have programs for children anywhere from birth to even up to 12 years old. We have programs that will take students there. I personally teach the first two programs, which are Sound Beginnings and Let's Play Music. And it is music that is taught through play at a very age-appropriate level for those children.
Okay. And before we get too much into that, what's your background as far as music goes?
As far as music goes,
yeah.
Well, I took piano and I played the flute in elementary school, and then in college I got involved in choir and did voice lessons at Mesa Community College when I was there. And I've always had a love and a passion for music. My degree is in elementary education because I love teaching as well. And after I had my first child, I wanted to stay home with her, but I have loved teaching for so long that I couldn't completely let go of that. And that's kind of what's led me to become a music teacher, is being able to combine the passion of music and teaching and yet still be available for my own kids.
For your kids. Yeah, that does seem like a perfect setup. Huh?
It really is. Yeah. I'm very blessed.
Well, good. And so you're personally a big music fan?
I love music. I come from my grandmother is a very accomplished pianist and has taught piano even at the collegiate level. And so growing up in my house, it was just an unspoken rule that you learned to play an instrument. My dad learned to play several because he couldn't decide and ultimately settled on drums, which his mother doesn't always consider an instrument, but he's a very good drummer. And so music was just a big part of my life growing up. And
it was.
Yeah.
Okay. Music really is, it sounds a little cliche, but it is kind of the universal language, right?
It is.
I think everybody loves music in some form or another.
They do. We find that folk music especially, every culture has certain music that fits their culture and that's passed down through the generations in their culture, and that those are the best ways to teach children by using their folk music from their culture and their language. And so we incorporate that in all of our classes and our...
I was looking, see if I can pull up here, and we will link to the Let's Play Music website. But I was looking at, you're talking about the folk music, and one of the founders, let's see, I don't know how to say it, Zoltan or something.
Zoltan Kodály.
Yeah, and so he was talking about the folk music. Mm-hmm. But what did he say that I wanted to ask you about? Some sort of the solfege hand signs?
Solfege hand signs.
Solfege, okay.
Mm-hmm. He was one of the first founders, I guess you could say, and he took the hand signs and applied them to teaching music to children. And so, like in class, when we sing a major scale and we do do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do, and we have these hand signs that start down near our belly button and build up to our head to help reinforce that our pitches are going in that same direction as we sing, and that we're assigning a hand sign to help children's brains sort through those different pitches, that they really are different and that they mean something different.
Wow, that's very interesting. And you couldn't obviously see her doing the hand signs. Maybe we can link to, I'm sure there's something on YouTube with those. We use, as speech and language pathologists, what we call cued speech. And they are hand signs that go along with certain sounds that we make. So that's interesting. And they're very highly effective, by the way. And so that's interesting that you guys also use hand signs, like those physical movements, to go along to teach kids.
Yeah. It's interesting because even if you were to go to, oftentimes solfege is used even at like the high school and collegiate levels when they're learning to sight sing a piece. So when they come upon a new piece, a lot of times with like regional music competitions and things like that, a piece of that is sight singing a piece that they've only had for a few minutes, and they have to learn it and sing it. And a lot of times that's done through solfege because they're looking at those pitch relationships. They know where to find do, and then they can sing from there without having to get caught up on the words of the song.
Ah, very cool. Yeah, so there right there is another kind of similarity between learning music and learning language and speech as well.
Absolutely.
So you talk on that. So there we're kind of using, multiple senses, but obviously we're moving through space. So it's kind of that physical sense.
Yes.
Right. And then obviously hearing. One thing that you guys are really big on is incorporating as many senses as possible.
Absolutely. The more senses that are involved in learning, the better a child learns. We all have a primary way that's easiest for us to learn. Some people are auditory learners. Some people are kinesthetic learners where they have to experience and do in order to, and have that physical action in order to really cement something in their brain. Some people are visual learners where they need to see it, they need to read it. And so we all have, as humans, we all have kind of different ways that we learn. And so our philosophy is that we want to incorporate as many of those as possible so that every person, every child in our class is getting the best way for them to learn with each activity. And so we repeat activities, we have repetition, but we will change up. Maybe we sing a song with some physical activity once, and then the next time we'll use a chord map or something to sing it, where we're tapping into more the visual representation. Or, we learn it sometimes just by hearing it at first, and that's tapping into that auditory for those kids that are more auditory learners. And so we try to incorporate as many of those senses into every class and every repetition as we possibly can.
Okay, that's fascinating. It's really cool. And I can just say, as a language pathologist, probably the single biggest, most important thing that I'm always pushing with parents, teaching kids, is getting to know your senses. Because from a language perspective, being able to describe using all of your senses gives people the ability to really express themselves in much more amazing ways. So I like to tell parents, so pick maybe a day each week, and we're going to talk about seeing. And so all day we talk about colors and sizes and shapes. And then the next day we're talking about feeling. So we're talking about this is rough, this is smooth, that sort of thing. So it is probably the single most important thing I work with kids, is working on those senses. So all the more reason that us working together is so good, because if we can wake up those senses, especially through music, I think kids are more likely to, those adjectives and whatnot for senses are more likely to sink in with music.
Absolutely. So one of the activities that we've done in class is we'll march around to a steady beat. So they start by hearing the steady beat kept on a drum, or just by patting our laps or clapping our hands, some kind of a steady beat that they hear. And then we want them to recreate it, either by following with the same activity, whether it's pointing to a page, whether it's marching around and making their feet match that steady beat, or producing a sound. Sometimes we'll use like an animal sound or a musical sound as we march from one area to another. And so they're learning in all of those different ways to reproduce that steady beat, whether it's physically through their feet, verbally through their mouth, with their hands, playing an instrument as well, whatever. I don't remember where I was going.
That's all right. So,
similar to what you were saying with using all of our senses, okay, that we try to incorporate. There we go. That we try to incorporate all of those different senses as well into those activities to keep. So
I'm assuming, doing some research before we started, that learning music, practicing music is good for listening skills.
It is incredible for listening skills. In fact, I was just reading the other day a research article that was talking about newborns and their abilities to hear all of the different tones of speech. I watched a TED Talk that talked about how babies are able to hear all of the different tones in all of the different languages, from about birth to 6 months old. And then at 6 months old, something starts to happen in their brain where they start to lose the tones and the intonations and things that aren't in their mother tongue or the language that they're being exposed to all the time. And so that, preserving language has to start with babies. It can't start with our adults. We have to start earlier. But there was a research article that talked about newborns and how that a lot of what they're hearing is the musical aspects of speech. It's not you can say a word to a newborn, and how you say it means more to them than what you're saying, because they're not associating the meaning of those words or not, but they are hearing the musical aspects of it. They're hearing the highs and the lows, the happies and the sads, all of those things. And so we really, as humans, we do learn to listen before we learn to speak. And music helps accelerate that in the brain. It helps make those connections, those neural connections. this article was just saying that, without the ability to hear musically, we'll never be able to learn language. And I thought that was fascinating as a music person, that music is that imperative to learning language.
Wow. That is incredible. So it's actually strengthening pathways when they're listening to music. And I'm familiar, I don't know if it was the exact same TED Talk, but I think from a speech therapy point of view, you're right, that from about 6 months to especially 9 months is when children are really learning to discriminate the sounds of their specific language that they're learning. So anybody out there listening that is going to have children or has very young children, I would love to see a long-term study done on really, really emphasizing particular sounds from 6 months to really a year. But that is the golden time zone when kids are learning to discriminate. One of the biggest problems that we have when it comes to speech is kids can't discriminate, and they're not hearing that they're making mistakes. So if we use music at that early of an age, along with very purposeful modeling of the sounds of in our case, the English language, I think that we could probably have a lot less speech delays.
Yeah, I think the early intervention, I think, is something that we hear a lot, but even so, I think people look at early intervention as 2 to 4,
right?
And yet our intervention needs to be starting so much earlier. That the baby's brains, we only have so much of an understanding of how much information a baby's brain can absorb, because obviously we're limited by, and there's been so much development in being able to study the brain and neuroscience in recent years, but that we're finding that babies are so capable of hearing and learning at such an early age. And like you were saying, that 6 months to a year, I don't think people really see that as prime language learning time for their children. And yet, I've seen it in my classrooms where kids who start young, who start at 6 months old or earlier as a sibling coming with an older sibling, that those children just have such accelerated language. I have a little guy that started at 7 months last year, and he was 7 months old when he started sound beginnings classes. And by the time we finished in May, he was speaking in word phrases at less than 18 months,
Wow.
18 months old. But he could look around my house and he could point to a fan and say fan, and he could point to a book and say book. And he knew what those items were, and he was already expressing. And in talking to Mom, she said, I debated whether to come back for a second year, but she said, I just see so much of his speech that I attribute to being in music class and being able to hear all of those different sounds and things. And I just think that I can't not. And so they're coming back for a second year, which is great. But I see, that's just one example of, and yet at 7 months old, he wasn't talking when he started, he wasn't even producing sounds at 7 months old. And yet in that, 9-month period of classes, how much his brain grew and how much he grew, and how incredible, that is. And so early intervention needs to start much earlier than we're starting now.
There's research literally that, children in the womb.
Yes.
So,
in fact, Zoltan Kodály that you were just referencing, once he was asked when musical training should start for a child, and his answer was 9 months before the birth of the mother. So saying that, that music is passed down from generation to generation, but if we as adults don't hear it and don't sing it, it doesn't ever make it to that next generation. And so it's, you can never start too early.
I really see, and so, we're talking about early intervention as being, from in the womb on. But there is so much data saying that, because you're right, we don't look at a 6-month-old and think this is somebody who is understanding all this language that I'm saying. And they aren't necessarily, but what's happening is you are literally creating pathways for each word. So when a child hears a certain word over and over and over, even at 3 months, that pathway is being created.
Yes.
So when they get to kindergarten, if they've heard that a lot, then they can reference it. It's already there. But I see music as almost a way to facilitate, speed it up, almost, that it's almost a extra fuel for listening and retaining.
Yeah. Music is one of the few things in life that uses our entire brain, that uses all the different parts of our brain in order to make sense of it. When you're playing music, you're that physical, and your brain has to be able to do the physical things as well as hear it, and then process what you're hearing in order to sing it or reproduce it on an instrument. And so 100%, you're creating those brain synapses, those pathways where the information is able to travel more freely inside that brain. And those things, babies, there's an interesting chart that shows, the development of those neural pathways in babies' brains, and how much those connections are made in that first year of life, and how many different connections are made, and that you're born with all of the
physiological.
Yeah, those places are all there. It's creating the connections between them. That's what is growing and learning. And the connections that aren't used are lost.
That's right.
And your brain absolutely discriminates between what it needs and what it doesn't need.
Right.
And so the earlier we can introduce all of those different things to babies and to children, the stronger those connections are, which means information is much more easily able to move around in their brain and to process from their brain to the other parts of their body.
Yeah, it's making language and listening more second nature as they get older, because the pathways are so strong.
Yeah.
Right. So talking on that, I was looking another thing about. Well, there's just learning and listening to music, but it's specifically for learning how to play an instrument. It says training to play instrument is believed to increase gray matter, which, for those who don't know, gray matter, it's essentially muscle for the brain, if you want, for a lack of a better term. And this is saying that so this is learning an instrument. It's making your brain have more muscle. And they said that it improves auditory processing and memory just by learning to play instruments. Do you know anything more about that?
Absolutely. In fact, with some of the Alzheimer's and dementia research, they're saying some of the best ways to combat that is to learn to play an instrument later in life.
Wow.
To pick up something new so that you can help your brain create some of those new connections and be able to strengthen that gray matter or the parts of your brain that are maybe getting lost.
Yeah.
There's still so much research going on about those types of later in life diseases with the dementia and the Alzheimer's, but that I've heard that as a suggestion many times in various different places, that learning an instrument later in life is one of the best things you can do to combat those.
Some of those. So I read that, and I also read that it's, just music in general is especially good for children who were premature.
Yes. I just saw there was another article again about, music for premature babies, and how babies that they were using music in the hospitals to try to help strengthen those premature babies so that they could fight and they could eventually become, able to be weaned off of their various machines or different things.
Wow, that's fascinating.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just such a gift. I was also reading it. Music literally releases dopamine, right?
It does. It makes you happy.
Yeah.
It makes you happy. And with that, I think music is a great way to experience feelings too. That, oftentimes when we're feeling a certain way, whether it be happy or sad or angry, there are certain songs or certain musical elements that come to mind. One of the things that we do in classes, we use classical music to help make sense of those feelings. And so we are looking at different classical music songs, and we put characters to them, or we put dance moves to them, simple dance moves. Like today in class, we were pretending to be elephants and dancing to this classical music, and what parts sound like the elephant's trunk going up and what parts sound like the elephant walking, but teaching our bodies and our brains to be able to hear those different elements of music and then make sense of them. And I think that with feelings, a lot of times people have a song they love to listen to when they're feeling good and life is great and they're feeling happy. There's that song that comes to mind for most people.
Absolutely.
As well as when you're sad and life is hard, there's a different song usually that comes to mind that you just really relate to. And sometimes it's a new song that you hear, sometimes it's something that you grew up with, just depending on your experiences. But so often, people are able to make sense of their emotions through music, whether it's hearing music or playing music or, participating in dancing to music or however. But I think as humans, we are drawn to expressing our emotions and dealing with our emotions through music.
I don't think there's probably anybody out there that when you hear a certain song, it just takes you back, right, to a certain time.
Memories come flooding.
Which is probably why music is so helpful for memory also. That's one thing they talked about is listening to music helps with memory, and it allows us to make associations, that sort of thing.
Yes.
Another thing that as language pathologists that we work with is emotions and the words that go along with it. So often we have kids in here that are the ones that have issues with language delays are very frustrated. And a part of it is not only do they not have the words to express how they're feeling, they don't have enough language to reason in their own heads to make sense of everything. Mm-hmm. So I think that's another reason why us combining is so good, because we are able to use music to invoke emotions, and then along with it we can build on that language portion. Yeah,
absolutely. Interesting in the Let's Play Music program, which is for ages 4 to 6, and it's a beginning piano program. When we teach the major and minor tonalities, we actually label them as happy and sad to begin with.
Wow.
And I know that's not specific just to our curriculum. There are many curriculums that label it that way, but being able to help those children understand that, some things sound more fun and peppy and happy, and sometimes things sound more sad and slow and or minor, and so we label it as happy and sad before we label it as major and minor. So it really relates to them, and they can make sense of that.
Wow.
So,
and that's so interesting how we just intuitively know something sounds sad and something sounds happy.
This is a happy song and this is a sad song.
Wow, that's really powerful. Does this do you feel that certain people are just born musically inclined?
Good question. I do think some people are born musically inclined, and it's probably because of the experiences that they've had. Honestly, as in womb, if a child comes from a musical family where music is an important part of their life, and they are exposed to it in womb, then they're going to be more able to create music later on in life. But we also know that exposure to music can trump born talent, that when a person or a child especially is exposed to music at the right time, when their brain is primed and ready to learn it, they can do so much more and come across as a talented or innate musician, when really it was just that they were exposed to music and learning music at the right time.
That's really interesting. And in fact, I think it says something about that on your website.
It does,
Like, oh, this kid is so naturally talented, but really they were just exposed to it.
It was exposure, that we know it comes from exposure to good quality music education at the right time.
Wow. I think we all intuitively know how important and helpful music is. But being able, I think, to point at things from a neurological perspective, like we have, I think hopefully that's helpful to a lot of people.
Yeah.
It isn't just something that makes you feel good. It can literally make you a better learner and somebody who is more in touch with their feelings. It's just so heavily important.
It is. And, ultimately music is fun. I was just reading an article the other day that was talking about millennials and how millennials are not singing to our children anymore. We're not singing lullabies to our children at night anymore. And I don't know if that's because we have music so readily available, with our Alexas and our Amazons. We can just say, Alexa, play me a lullaby, and there it goes, whereas even 20 years ago, if you wanted music, it was much harder to have.
Oh, that is fascinating.
And that is having an effect on our children and their abilities to create music, and that we're kind of in a sense losing some of our culture in that way, because we're not passing down those folk songs. We're not sitting down with our children at night and singing the lullaby that our mothers sang to us and that their mothers sang to them, because we can pull something up on the electronic device and play it there. And then you can look at, what types of things like shows like American Idol, which is great and it has its place, or, America's Got Talent or whatever, but kind of what that's doing to us as a culture with music, and presenting that you're either a really great singer or you're a really terrible singer. Yeah. And if you're not a really great singer, then you must be a really terrible singer, and so you just shouldn't sing.
Just don't do
it. Yeah, and that's, it's sad to see the effects that's having on our culture, because music is such a great way to bond those generations, and I think we're losing that because of some of those great technological advances or fun shows to watch, but maybe we're losing the perspective of how important.
I'm so glad that you brought that up, because really so much about why we're doing this podcast is a journey for parents about how modern day life is changing us and affecting our children. And one of our big things here through this podcast and in the clinic is, how do we get back to basics in the modern world? And what you were just saying is, I think, quite profound, and I think you're right. It's so available to us that we don't sing anymore. And so anybody listening that has children, I think that's something really profound to take in. Still sing to your kids,
Sing them lullabies.
Yes.
That's one of the great things about like the classes and our classes that we do here together, is that those parents are involved and that they're getting tools like a CD or things like that to be able to take home and use in their life. But our hope is also that the parents are learning those songs and the children are learning those songs, and that there's authentic experiences happening at home as well. With my own children, they love to hear my husband sing, and they love it when he makes up silly songs or changes lyrics to songs. And my husband's not a singer. He's not he's not tone deaf, but he's not like a,
right,
you know, he's not going to get up and perform in front of anyone either. But my kids don't care, you know, the kids don't care how good it sounds, or, you know, they love to hear his voice, and they love to interact with him in that way. And so that's one of our hopes, is that we're giving the parents these tools to be able to go home and then create those authentic experiences through music with their kids, whether it's singing the songs that they've learned in class, or making up funny songs, you know, to go along with the songs they've learned in class. That's however that works with their families, but to kind of bridge that gap and to bring those families together. And
I mean, on so many levels, it's good to do that. One thing I kind of question is, are we harnessing technology, or is it harnessing us? And I think that it's fine if you have Alexa, that's great. Harness it, but also sing along and get your kids.
Get up and dance with them. If you're not comfortable singing, that's, you know, let's dance with our kids. Let's interact with them instead of just turning on the song and walking away, or you know, doing something else. You know, take those few minutes and have a dance party in your living room. And
one thing I did a video once, maybe we can link to it in this too, about using imagination and humor, and why goofing off with your kids and being silly and using your imagination isn't a waste of time. It's actually making them better learners and overall better, you know, members of society.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's why play is such a huge part of our curriculum and our classes, and that, you know, we need as adults to kind of let go a little bit of our adultness and be able to be silly with our kids. You know, that when you take the shoe and you put it on your head, and, you know, this is a good hat, and your kid's like, no, it's a shoe. You know, they know that it goes on their feet, but they're learning that, as well as, you know, sometimes it's okay to be silly, and it's okay to have fun, and we can still learn and grow while we're doing that. And so definitely, you know, we put high priority on enjoying and playing during our class times.
Yes, and I wish that you all could see it. We actually, I think I do have a video that kind of shows clips of what we're doing. I can link to that too. Anybody who sees it would I think just be tickled, because it really is something amazing to see. And I love that it's not just for the kids. You can't just come and drop your kids off. The parents have to be a part of it.
Yeah, the parents in Sound Beginning, so the earliest program for the birth to 4-year-olds, the parents are there every week with them, which is fantastic. Those little ones, they need their parent there with them. And it's a great bonding experience. As they get a little bit bigger, once they hit Let's Play Music 4 to 6, parents start to come a little bit less, but they're still very involved. And then ultimately, by the time they're, you know, in the oldest program, the parents are less involved as far as coming to class with them, but still very much involved at home. But again, that comes because that age, you know, 8+, they're able to deal with that better than a 2-year-old. But yes, we definitely put a lot of emphasis on the parents and having it be a joint class instead of just drop your kid off and then pick them up in an hour.
Right. And hopefully through that, it creates more of a culture in the house where they're doing that. And we deal with that. I'm about to do a podcast, actually, as far as speech therapy goes. Like, yes, we're here to help your kids with speech therapy, but we're just one of the tools, really. You are the most important thing. And it's about creating a certain culture in your home to implement things, you know.
Absolutely. That what happens at home is more influential than what happens anywhere else. And as a teacher, I saw that, you know, that the kids who would come to my classroom and the things that were reinforced at home, those children had so much more of an advantage than the kids who, you know, nobody sat to do homework with them, or nobody, you know. nobody was home after school with them or whatever. And I think as parents, it's hard because we live in a world where there are so many demands on us and so many things that require our attention, and we don't always have control over every circumstance. But, whatever, I always encourage my families in my classes that whatever time you can put towards it is going to benefit your child, and you're going to see those. You're going to see the payday. It's going to happen. It's going to come. But it's all about how much you put in. You're only going to get out of it what you put into it.
Yeah. And I think it's important that people know that. Yes, we all are super busy and difficult, and, some of us have happier days than others, that sort of thing. But even the little bits do matter. It may not seem like it in the moment, but even the little things you can do, they sink in. Yeah. They really do. The kids' brains, as we have talked about some, they are magic, and things sink in.
Yeah. A few minutes a day can make all the difference if that's all you have. So,
one more thing. I don't want to keep us here but too long, but I wanted to ask, is there some research about music in general, but your class specifically, as far as helping children read? Is it
music and language, and then also with literacy, that language and literacy go hand in hand.
Yes.
That usually strength in language also correlates to a strength with reading and literacy skills. So we in our Sound Beginnings program, that's one of our big focuses, I guess you could say, is language and literacy skills, teaching letter names, teaching sounds. We use the synthetic phonic sounds, so they're not adding on a inflection at the end of their M sound. It's a instead of a ma.
Right.
Yeah, which you guys know as speech and language pathologists. Yeah. But from an education standpoint, we found kindergartners going to kindergarten and having a hard time reading because they had those inflections on the end of their letters. So they'd go to read the word mom, and it was ma-ah, ma-ah.
Yeah.
And ma-ah, ma. And you're like, no, it's
Yeah.
And so something that simple as cutting off those, those up and downs at the end of our letter sounds can make a huge difference in affecting those literacy skills. And so we use music as our mode to teach those, but we definitely focus on those individual literacy skills. We work on tracking left to right on a page.
Oh, yeah.
We work on, top to bottom, left to right. We do a letter of the day, and we point to individual pictures so that they're correlating that this picture has this meaning, this picture has this meaning, which then transfers over to reading. This word has this meaning, starts with letter sounds, and then as they put them together to make words. And so it's kind of building those neural pathways, those abilities in their brain to be able to make sense of all of that kind of stuff. And so, there's a huge, so much research out there about literacy and how music helps to improve. Yeah,
I've seen through the classes that I've been a part of, like you guys will sing the alphabet, and then you go and you sing how it sounds, each letter. Yeah, I found that really interesting. Any other last things you'd like to say?
Just don't sing with your kids. As a music person, that's probably the biggest one. Don't be afraid to let loose and have fun with them. And it doesn't matter if you're the best musician out there.
Yeah.
Kids don't care. They just enjoy being with you and experiencing things with you. And so, and come try a class with us here at Chatterbox sometime.
Yeah, really, come check it out. It is so fun to watch. And I just watch it also break down barriers. The kids have such a fun time, and when they're relaxed and having fun, it's so much easier to learn. So,
absolutely.
Thank you. It's been a real delight.
Thanks for
just
having me.
Just getting to know you and having you a part of this clinic. I really do think it's a match made in heaven.
It is. I'm so happy to have met you and Tanya and to be working with you guys. So thanks for allowing me.
Yes, thank you. And that'll do it for our second podcast here at Time to Chat. Thank you all so much for listening. If you want to follow up on some of the things you heard about in this podcast and actually read even more into some of the things we talked about, music and childhood development, head over to our website, timetochat.org, and go to the podcast section. We'll have all kinds of good links for you. And as always, please feel free to drop us a note with any information you might have. Thank you.